Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
I discovered America in Sunflower County in May the 14th, 1911. I was born in a home of Jesse Everett Sheffield and Sally Ann Nairn Sheffield. I was a premature child, and they didn't know what to do with me, but they went by the doctor's orders and followed him, and here I am today. I'm almost 100 years old. I thank the Lord for my life, and I want to give him praise and credit for all that's done, good that's been done in my life. There's nothing been good on what God has done. I love the Lord supremely today, and I want to serve him the remainder days of my life. God has been good to me. I had a good home, but in 1918, the flu epidemic came by and took my mother, and she had given birth to a newborn baby, and she and the baby both were buried together in the same casket. And if I said it, they'd abuse a corpse for a mother holding a baby in a casket. But we was all upset because we didn't have a mother. But my dad said, well, he didn't know anything to do but put us in an orphan's home. And my Aunt Jimmy said, no, you're not going to put them in an orphan's home. If you do, I'll scratch your eyeballs out. And that stayed with me all my life. I never have forgotten what she said about, because I could just see my dad going around blind, and I didn't want that. But she said they would split the children up and give them to different homes, foster homes, around among the family, her brothers and sisters. So that's what they did. Some of them went to Uncle Albert and Aunt Susie, and I think Mortimer and Eddie Lou and Bill went there, and Aunt Jimmy kept, I believe it was me and Eva and Gilbert, and she had a baby of her own, so she kept us. But we moved to Moorhead after my mother died, and my dad moved to Moorhead and left the children all up in the Delta, up around Sunflower, Rural, and Sunflower County, and so I got started in school in Moorhead, and I was all by myself going to a big old school. I'd never been to a big public school like that before. I had gone to a little country school they called Rico School. That was before the schools was consolidated. And I was in that big school, and I was going there by myself into the big building all by myself, and I got acquainted with some children though, and I finally was settled, but I was lonesome for Bill. Bill and I were very close, and we were just like twins growing up. We was always together. But it wasn't long till about 2 months later, they decided to let Bill come and live with us and go to school with me, so I'd have somebody to go to school with, because we had to walk about a mile to the school and down a railroad track, and I was scared to walk down that railroad track, but my dad would take me to school in the mornings, and some afternoons I'd have to walk home. I'd have to walk by myself. But when Bill got there, I was very happy, because we were just like growing up together, and so I was happy because he was with me to go to school. And I took him to school and showed him around. We had some cousins going there too, and I introduced him to the cousins, and we finally made it okay during that time. But then wasn't long until my dad married my stepmother, Eunice Sheffield. She was a beautiful lady, was a young girl, about 18 years old, and she stepped into a house full of children. They were Eva and Edley and Mortimer and Gilbert and me and Bill. So there was about 6 children of us that she was stepped into a house full of children. So anyway, we loved her. And she was a a good mother to us. She made a home for us. We had some good days and bad days, but that's to be expected. But we went to school, and then we left Ruville, left Moorhead, and went to Ruville. Moved to Ruville. My dad got a place to rent up there, a farm place to rent. So we moved to Ruville and started the public school there, and lived in town. And our house burned down. And that was a bad thing to happen right at winter time. Burned all our blankets up and our warm clothes, our underwear. We had long underwear we wore. All our winter clothes burned up, and we had to sort of go short-handed for some clothes during that time. But anyway, we made it through, and then finally we moved out in the country and had country life then. And we lived out there several years, and I went to Hannah School. That's before schools was consolidated, and we went to a country school called Hannah. Hannah School is on the river, and beside the river. So we had to walk there, and when some days my dad would take us to school. Some days he'd come by and pick us up if it was raining bad. So we didn't have to fight the weather too bad because he was seeing that we was taken care of. But then we finally moved to Isabella. We moved to Isabella, and that's where Robert was born. And the twins was born in Louisville. And then in 1924, and in 1925, they were born in January in 1924, and Robert was born in November of 1925. Then we moved from Isabella. My dad got a better place up in Slaughter, Mississippi. And that's just a few miles away from in LaFleur County. So we got in school in LaFleur County, Slaughter, Mississippi, and that's where we finished our school years in Slaughter. And we stayed there until 1929, and that's when the crash came. My dad went broke, and we all had to make a sacrifice. So he had already been looking at a place up in Blytheville, Arkansas. This was about 1929, and so he went up there and was homesteaded 8 acres that he had to clear. It was all woods, even it's so wooded, thick with woods, until even had wild wolves out there and come around the house at night and howl. And we'd look out the window and see while the moon was shining, we could see the wolves come out there and rub their nose around the washboard and tubs and make noise and frighten us to death. We were scared to get out even in daytime because those wolves would get us. But anyway, that's the year everybody was homesteading land up there at that time, and we was in a new neighborhood, and we had a lot of neighbors, and they lived right across the street, or right across the road rather, and just maybe a block or two up the road, but we had plenty of new neighbors, and we had to make new friends. No church was out in that neighborhood. They was trying to organize a church and get some kind of church organized out there for us, but that was before my time. After my time, after I'd already left, they got a church organized. But we had a meeting place. We met up on the highway there, and every Sunday afternoon they'd play ball up there and have a big meeting, and I got acquainted with a lot of friends, and that's where I met my husband. He was on the ball field out there, and he was doing some activities like standing on his head and a lot of comic things that he was doing, and so he appealed to me, and I thought that he was nice looking, and he was jolly and all, and so I got acquainted with him, and so we started dating, and it wasn't long until we was married. because time was growing pretty short at that time, because my dad had already made another visit back to Mississippi. He wanted to move back to Mississippi. So my boyfriend says, well, I can't have that. Said, I can't go to Mississippi to see you. Said, we're going to have to get married right away. So that right away was within a week's time. So we made up our mind, that's what we want to do, get married. He said, if you can take care of all these children, you know you can take care of some of your own. So he encouraged me. So I thought, well, that's what I want to do. So we got married, and they moved away and left me in Blytheville. And I was lonesome without my big family, because we had a big family, and I was the main chief and bottle cook, washer, so to speak, because my stepmother was sick during that time, and I had all the laundry to do and all the cooking to do, and taking care of a new baby. Paul was a new baby at that time, and so I was taking care of him, and Harry was just a little bit older than him, and he was just crawling around on the floor, but he was a good baby. So we had really two babies to take care of during that time. But anyway, I got married and got out of the family, and they moved away back to Mississippi, and then finally they moved over to Elaine, Arkansas. That's where he started making a crop then over there, and left me in Blytheville, Arkansas with my husband. Well, this was during the hard times, when the crash came. Everybody was losing jobs, and nobody was hiring them, and people was firing them. Everybody was losing their jobs instead of getting jobs. So he had to move from Blytheville, Arkansas, because his boss had to give up his. He was a deputy sheriff of that county, Mississippi County of Arkansas, and he had to give his job up because his boss was not able to be a sheriff anymore, and things just closed down. Everything was closing down. So we had to move away from Blytheville to Memphis for my husband to get a truck driving job. They had a lot of places there to hire people in Memphis, so we moved to Memphis, and we rented an apartment, and he got a job out there at the trucking company, and he was pretty good to keep a job most all the time. We had just a one bedroom and a living room together and a kitchen, but that was all we could afford at that time. But we was glad to have that. Anyway, we stayed there about a year or two in Memphis, and he worked during that time. But then we moved to Mississippi, and we was getting close to around where my dad was living, somewhere, let's see, I believe it was I can't remember what county, Coahoma County is where we moved to. And my dad got a job of driving a school bus, and he was on the route with where the kids was going to school, so he'd take his kids to school and pick up other people's children and take them. That was his route. So anyway, we was there a couple of years, and my husband got a job on the levee. They was building a levee during that time, and he got a job of hauling gravel on the levee to build that levee on the Mississippi River. So we finally moved into a camp, what they called a camp. We didn't move into the camp, but it's right close around. There's a farm place that had quit farming, and so using some of the land to haul dirt to build a levee with. And so the man hired him he had a vacant house there, and so Barney saw him about renting a house for him because it's right on the levee. It looked like that they were going to take the house where the house was established, take it for the ground to make a haul dirt to the levee. Anyway, he had a job there, so we stayed there, rented that farmhouse. And the man said, well, you're going to have to farm some land. So I said, well, I'll do some trucking farming. I plant some gardens and have some gardens. I said, this camp down here needs vegetables. I need raise some vegetables. I know how to raise vegetables. And I raised vegetables and sold them to the camp. So that was pretty good business, you know, for me. Of course, I had a job of my own, and we had a little car. I had an old make of Dodge, and I'd pick my beans and peas and whatever I had to sell and take it down to this camp and sell it to those campers, because they didn't have nothing but just to go buy stuff out of the grocery store, and they was glad to get fresh vegetables. So I had cucumbers and radishes and things that they had in the spring for people to buy. And then when spring came on good and fast, so I had peas and beans and cabbage and all kind of vegetables to sell. And I'd load that car up. It was just a car with a rubber seat in the back. I'd load that car up with vegetables and take it down to the camp and sell it. And that's where we got our money when he wasn't working. Say when rain came, they couldn't haul dirt. They couldn't move the dirt then because it'd get stuck. And so some days we'd be without a payday, you know, but I kept us going with my vegetables I sold. So that was a pretty good item for that. Well, finally the levee job gave out, and we moved to Memphis. And there he went to hunt a job back as a truck driver from some of those trucking companies. And when he went down to a stockyard and he got into the stock, he loves animals and stock. And so he hung around down there, and a man down there hired him, but we'd have to move to Columbus, Mississippi. Well, I said, that's a job. If that's a job, we'll go to it. So we went to it, and he was taking care of stock. The man had bought 50 head of white-faced cattle, and he wanted him to take care of them. And he had some horses. He wanted to take care of those, I think about 3 or 4 horses. And the man had bought a place up at Columbus, and so it was out in the country about 6 miles out of Columbus. And so we moved up there. He stayed a year helping raise those heifers, 50 white-faced cows, heifers he raised. And so then his job played out. So we moved into town, and I got a job at the garment factory, 15 cents an hour. 15 cents an hour now, 40 hours, $1.60. So, you know, that's wasn't no money at all, but we was glad to get it. I stood out in all kind of weather early in the morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning, to get that job. And when I got the job, I thanked God for it. And that's what we lived on until he got work to do. So he started doing a little carpenter work too, because his dad had taught him how to saw and cut things out and make things, and so he started doing a little carpenter work and pick up money that way. So anyway, it was hard times during that time, but we were so glad to get the kind of work. If it was 15 cents an hour, people were still standing out there early in the morning trying to get a job when I was going to work. But finally, things started opening up, looked like a little bit better. He was getting more back to his way of living, of driving a truck on long routes, you know, long trips. So he had a chance to move to Jackson. So we moved from Columbus, Mississippi to Jackson about 19 1939, I think it was, 1939, we moved to Jackson. And he got a job with a fleet line there, going to a long distance haul. So we rented an apartment, and we started living there. And that's where we got in touch with my dad and my stepmother and the family there. They was living in town, so we got an apartment not too far from them. So anyway, that's where we met with them, and I got the kids started in Sunday school, and I was already in church myself, and my husband was, and we had started going to Nazarene Church up in Columbus, Mississippi, out at a camp meeting, Millport camp meeting, and then they had a church there in town in Columbus, and the man's name was Phillips. I'm going back to Columbus now, but during those Columbus days. The man's name, the preacher's name was Albert Phillips. So he and my husband hit it off real good because both names was Phillips. And so we started church there and got into the church and in church work, and then we were moved to Jackson. Well, I got the kids all in Sunday school there, and I started working in church then, and I've been working in church with Nazarene all my life ever since 1937. But I sort of lost my thought there when I jumped from one thing to another. I didn't mean to do that. But anyway, my time in Jackson, I was working in the church, and then my husband got a chance to move to Brookhaven, Mississippi, to work for a truck line there. And the man was just starting a business, and he wanted a stable man that would stay with him. So he hired Barney, and we moved to Brookhaven, and we moved there around Thanksgiving. And we was in a revival in Jackson, and we'd go every weekend to that revival. It lasted 2 weeks. 2 weekends we went to that revival, and the last weekend, well, my husband went to the altar and got saved, and I was so thankful that he was saved. And so he immediately when he got saved, he said the Lord had called him to preach, that he wasn't supposed to be driving a truck, but he said, what we'll do is just save our money for about 6 months, and then we'll go out and start preaching. And he wanted me to go get a vacant house, a building where we could start a Sunday school, a Nazarene Sunday school. So that was our aim when he got on this trip to Florida. He was making trips down to Florida. He'd take milk and eggs down to Florida and bring vegetables and fruit back up here to sell to Piggly Wiggly and the other big stores here. And so that's where he was working when he got killed. He was, they didn't have the big roads like they have now, the interstate. They just had single roads, where one go one way or the other on the same road. And the man come around a slight bend, and he didn't turn fast enough, and he ran into my husband, hit him head on, and killed him instantly. So I was without a husband then, and my husband was killed in that accident, but I didn't get a thing out of it. People thought maybe I would get something out of it, but the man that they had done was driving. He was drinking and driving, and drove a big trailer truck, and the trailer swirled around and hit him head on, and killed him instantly. But anyway, the man was killed at a nightclub before he got in trial. When he got up to have his trial, well, they had called me down. I had to go down for the trial, but they postponed it, and while it was postponed, this man that was driving the truck that killed my husband was killed, and so I didn't get anything out of his death. I don't know why, but I had some good lawyers working on the case, but they didn't make it. said I don't know just what the reason was, but anyway, I didn't get anything out of his death. But I just thank the Lord that I had a job and I was still working. And I came over to Vicksburg after I lost my husband. Bill came over to Jackson. He said, Eunice, if you come to Vicksburg, I'll get you a job. I said, okay, I'll be over this weekend. So I packed my clothes, and I had that little Plymouth coupe car, and I didn't know anything about Vicksburg, and I had been to Bill's house. I knew how to get to his house, and I scared to death of these hills because I never had driven in the hills. I was just a new driver, and I hadn't driven in the hills. And my car was old, and the brakes was weak, and I didn't have any good brakes, and so. But anyway, I made it over to Vicksburg, out to Bill's house, and he told me to get dressed the next morning and go up to the garment plant. I didn't even know where it was. I didn't know anything about Vicksburg then, but I found it, and I went in and I put my application in, and the man said, who sent you here? I said, Bill Sheffield, and he said, okay, and she put me to work. I went to work as in the cutting room. I had worked in a garment plant up in Columbus or so because I had some experience where he thought that I would be good. So I worked for him, Mr. Short. I never will forget him. He was a good man. And his son Melvin worked with him. And so he lived out on Clay Street here, and I never will forget him. But he was a good man, and he kept me until I got a job over while I was here working in a garment plant. I got to thinking, am I going to work in this garment plant all my life? No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go to night school and get me a business education. I'm going to get a better job. I'm not going to work in this plant. So that's what I did. I lived with the Millers. By then the gas ration was on, and I had to have a ration for gas and ration for tires. And so I managed to move in town, so I was living with Bill and his family out on, whereabouts we live out there? Anyway, we lived out in the country about a mile, and I had to save gas. And I moved in town, lived with the Millers, the pastor's wife, and his family, lived with them. And it was a help to him because the church wasn't able to pay him much, but I could pay him board, and they'd take my board money and buy groceries with it. So that was made a good deal for them. So I lived with them and saved gas. And then I had to have some tires. And Bill says, well, I'll sign up for your tires, but I don't think that you'll get them. I said, you sign up for them. I believe I'll get them. You just sign up for them. So he signed up for them. One day he called me up. He said, okay, sis, come up and buy your tires. Says your order went through. I said, well, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. So my brother never will forget that because he didn't have no faith at all that I'd get those tires. But he said that God answered my prayer. So he did. God did answer my prayer. He gave me 4 brand new tires. Of course, I paid for them, but they granted them to me. And nobody else would get tires, and they didn't know how I got them. I said, I just talked to the man upstairs. I just knew who to talk to. And they all had a big laugh at it. But anyway, that was one of my brother's big stories that he told on me about how God answered my prayers. But I enjoyed living. I was living with Bill and Myrtle when Billy was born. I never will forget Billy. Billy was the cutest little, fat little boy you ever did see. And I never will forget him. And I wanted to give him his first bath, but his mother said, no, she was going to give him his first bath. And so we sort of had a little argument. I said, okay, since you're the mama, I'll let you give him his first bath. But I got a chance to give him a bath, too, at different times. we love Billy, and I've always loved Billy. I remember when he grew up, how he could used to eat hamburgers like everything. A grown person could eat one, but Billy'd have to have two. He really got fat. We always played with him, had a good time with him, because he was always jolly. He's still good, jolly. We still love him. But anyway, I left Vicksburg and went to Meridian, and I worked in the church over there. And then the pastor was leaving there and going up to North Carolina, I believe. And so I didn't want to go to North Carolina with him. I said I'd come back to Jackson. My stepmother's in the hospital at the time, and I said she needs me, and I need to go to help her. So I came back to Jackson, lived with them, and helped her with the children. She had 3 children at home, and the twins were still in school. They were in high school by then. So I stayed with them and helped them in schoolwork and everything, and helped my stepmother. And I lived there. I got a job out at the fertilizer company, a Oyster Fertilizer Company, as a payroll clerk. And I had business education then, and I got a job as a payroll clerk. I worked there for 13 years. And in the meantime, I was part-time working for Standing Home Product. I put on standing parties at night and go to work in the daytime at the factory, payroll clerk. But I was getting to where I was making more money with Stanley than I was on the job, so I quit the Ross Company after 13 years. I quit them and went to work full-time with Stanley. And I got up to be unit manager, and I moved up to Greenwood, Mississippi. I wanted to move up there where the territory was new, and I could get more leaders, group leaders to hire. So more group leaders I hired, more money I'd get. So I moved to Greenwood, Mississippi, and started a new unit up there, Standing Home Product. And then I got me a unit, got me several leaders up there, sales leaders. And so I stayed up there from 1956 until 1966, I believe it was, 66, when Ross was born. And by then, I had already adopted Beverly. Beverly was my great niece, and I adopted her in about I believe it was 1956 or somewhere along in there, 54. And I adopted her so I'd have a family. And I sent her to school, and finally she got old enough, she thought she's old enough to marry. So she was 14 and a half years old, she wanted to get married. And I said, no, you want to finish school. She said, no. I said, they want to get married. And the man that she was married, he was just 18 years old. And she was only 14 and a half. The law says you can't get married. And she said, well, we'll slip off and get married. And she says, if I have to, I'll get pregnant and get married. I said, no, you don't. Don't you do that. I'll see that you get married if you determined to get married. So I went, traveled long trips to see her mother, see if she agreed to her getting married. And so Cecil went with us. Her boyfriend went with us. So she met him, so she agreed for Beverly to get married. And so I took the word back to the courthouse to tell them that her mother agreed for her to get married. So they granted her license to get married. She got married. So that's how she got married to Cecil. Cecil, he'd already rented an apartment and had it furnished before they got married. And he was a good manager. He worked at a piano company up in Greenwood, Mississippi. He had a good job, and he worked up there until he wanted to do better. And his dad and mother moved to New Orleans, and so he wanted to move there too, I think. But in the meantime, I had a chance to go to work at Warner McPherson. He has a store. He wanted me to run his country music store up in Nashville. And so I said, well, let's move up there and see if he could get a job up there. So there was a lot of places up there he could get work. So sure enough, we moved to Beverly. Cecil moved with me, and we lived in with Mrs. McPherson until they got him an apartment. They got them an apartment, and he got him a job. So everything was going well. But then his dad and mother wrote him a letter, or his sister wrote him a letter, said that his dad was real sick, and if Cecil wanted to see him alive, to better come home to see him. So that upset Cecil. He wanted to move to New Orleans right then. So he gave up his job and moved down to New Orleans, and he got down there when he had just hunted a job and worked in a grocery store at Columbus, at Greenwood. He worked in a grocery store there, so he got a job in a grocery store in New Orleans, and then finally got him a job, a better job. But come in. My time in Nashville, I took care of Warner Mac's country store. He sold Carter paint along with the other stuff he had in the to sell. He had country stuff to sell, but I stayed there for 3 years and worked with him, and he was getting ready to get out of that kind of business and get into men's suits business, and I told him I couldn't work with men's suits, and it wasn't for me, it was for somebody else, and that I was be going to New Orleans. By that time I'd made up my mind that I wanted to go to New Orleans to be down there. Beverly was pregnant with Carol Ann, and I wanted to go down and be with her when she had a baby. And so that's what we did. I loaded up, and in November I went down to New Orleans. It was the day that they had an election day. I never forget, because I listened to the election all the way down there. And I got down there, I rented me a furnished apartment, and on the same street where they live. And then next day, Friday, this was Thursday, I rented an apartment. I went down, left on Tuesday to go down, and I got there on Thursday morning. I got up and got me a paper, and I saw that they had an ad in the paper that night at the Baptist Hospital. So next morning, Saturday morning, I got up and went to the hospital to put my application in. They had it for a cashier, so I went to the hospital to put my application in, and it was closed. And so the next, I waited till Monday morning, I went, and I put my application in, and I gave him Warner Mac as reference. That's the last place I worked. And so he called, he didn't write Warner Mac, he called him and asked him, could he recommend me? And he said, man, she's the best in the world. He said, you couldn't get a better cashier than her. Said, she worked for me 3 years, and I never found a fault in a mistake or anything where she made. Said, you hire her. So he hired me. They called me. That when I left the hospital, they told me that they'd call me later. So on Thursday, he called me and told me that I had the job to come to work Monday. So I went to work Monday as a cashier, and I worked there for 3 years. And Barney was, Bill was down there at that time, getting set up in building for the buildings. And so his business was getting at Porter-Johns. He had Porter-Johns and Porter building. That was his business. And so his business was getting so growing so fast he couldn't take care of it. And so he came by Robert's place one weekend, and he said, told him about his business is growing so, and he had to hire somebody. He said, well, why don't you hire, he said, you got the best right there at your fingertips, why don't you hire her? He said, Eunice? He said, yeah. He said, you can't beat her. So he came back to the office that morning. He said, I want to hire you for run my business. And I said, what? I want to hire you to run my business. And he said, I'll pay you and you can stay here at home. You won't have to be out on the street. And there, traffic's terrible. And you're out all hours of night and time of day. So I thought it over and I said, okay, I'll take you up on it. I'll get out of the traffic. So I went to work for Bill, and he told me he'd pay me a lot more than his payment at the hospital. So after 3 years at the hospital, I was ready to give it up anyway. So I went to work for Bill, and I built his business up. It was already building up, and I built it up. I got him set up with a Better Business Bureau, and had a lot of work done on it, and I got insurance for the employees, and I did a lot of improvement on his business, and so he appreciated it. So he got ready to retire then. He was old enough to retire, and so he retired and moved back to Vicksburg, and he said, yes, I don't want to leave you down here. I want you to move up there with us. And you can live in my old house, and you won't have to pay rent. And he said, I want you to move up there. I don't want you to leave you down here in wicked old New Orleans. And I said, well, I don't like it, New Orleans anyway. So I packed up and moved up to Vicksburg. So this is where I've been ever since. Thank the Lord for living in Vicksburg and working in the church here. So I've had a quite a life, in living a widow's life, and living a home by myself. But God has been good to me. So I just give God credit for every good thing that I've done. I worked in Jackson Church, Meridian Church, and Vicksburg Church, and Greenwood Church. I got a church started in Greenwood. It lasted 7, 8 years, I don't know, 10 years, something like that. And then they closed it because they had too many holiness churches already in Greenwood. But they said that they couldn't get one going because the holiness movement was already in that city. So anyway, I did my part trying. God's been good to me, and I just want to praise Him for all the good things He's done in my heart and life. I know there's a lot that I've left out that I'd like to tell about. I'd like to go back and tell a little bit about my mother a little bit. When she was living, I remember when she was living that she was the only woman. She and another lady was the only 2 women in the state of Mississippi that drove a car at that time. And she took her instruction book, sat down and read the instruction book, and went by the instruction book and learned to drive a car. And she had us to sit on the porch. She said, now I want y'all to stay on this porch. Don't you get off, because if you get on this porch, I might run over you, because I don't know how to drive, and I'm learning. So I'm not going to run into the house, but I don't want you to get out in the yard. So she'd go down the street one way, and then turn around. She'd see us doing okay. She'd pass the house and go down about a mile the other way, turn around and come back. Finally, she turned in the yard. She's practiced enough running up down the street. We were still on the porch. We knew not to get off that porch, though, because Mom May would tell on us. She'd tell her everything we did. Mom May was a tattletale. She kept us straight. She was the oldest one, and she kept us straight. But my mother was a sweet lady. She learned to drive, and she took us to church every Sunday, rain or shine. We went to church because we had a car, and no gravel roads, but we got on those slippery roads, and sometimes we looked like we was going to slip off the road, but she managed to keep that car on the road and get us home. One time she had a little accident, and she ran into a bridge, a butte on the bridge, and my dad knocked one of the lights out, and my dad fussed at him about it. But the same day he'd had a wreck, but he didn't tell her, not then. But later he told her that he had a wreck. But he fussed at her about having a wreck. And she said, well, just what if I didn't run into that bridge? If people said, oh, the car would have gone off in the canal. And he didn't know what to say then because he had a carload of children. There was Eva, Gilbert, and Bill, and me, and Ed Lou, and Morley. So it's 5 or 6 of us, wasn't it? So we were still alive, and he had to thank God for that. But my dad was proud of my mother, and we was proud of our stepmother. She was a good woman. She was made us a home, and every day was a beautiful day. But we had good times and we had some bad times. She would play ball with us, and she played marbles with us. We enjoyed her because she was a plaything for us. But we had a good time with her, and we did have some bad times. I guess that's about the extent of my own. I could tell about some times I made visitation time. We'd go visiting on Saturday at the church. We'd go visit for the sick people and newcomers coming to church. We had somebody go with us to visit. We'd visit with some people we'd have prayer with, and we had a real good time. I'd get some of the Sunday school teachers out, and we'd go visiting together. We had a wonderful time. I held vacation Bible schools, and I taught the children at night at the Junior Society. I taught them at nighttime. At daytime, Sunday morning, I taught a Sunday school class, but they had different classes for the Sunday school. At the Junior Society, we had all ages, but the Sunday school we had, at Junior Society, we had all ages together. Didn't have our separate ages. We had like up to 12, 13 years old. But I spent many hours in church working for the Lord. But I don't regret not one minute of it. And I remember seeing a lot of boys and girls saved in altar prayer during revival time and during vacation Bible school time. I guess that's all my life. Whole life story. I could tell some sad things, but I don't like to run sad things into good times. So I guess that's the extent of my life. I mentioned my dad, but I didn't mention of him of being a successful cotton crop grower. The neighbors and all his friends knew that he was he studied the crops. He knew what kind of plow to use in wet weather and what kind of plow to use in dry weather, and they would come to him for advice. So he was very successful in raising cotton, and he had always a good provider for his family. I never remember a time my dad been without a car all his life, as I remember that he had a car, and sometimes 2 cars. My mother had a car, and he had a car. He got her a brand new Model T car when they first came out, and they had an instruction book with it, and she read the instruction book and taught herself how to drive. She'd tell us that, y'all get on the front porch now, and stay on the porch, don't get off the porch, because when I come in the yard, I don't know how, what I'll do about driving this car. So y'all stay on the porch and don't get on the porch because I won't run over the house. So while she was out going up and down the road, practicing, learning to drive, well, we would stay on the porch and watch her. And sometimes it would take a couple hours before she'd come back, but we wouldn't dare move that porch. We stayed on it all the time. But she learned to drive and would drive for the neighbors, and the neighbors got sick, had to go to the doctor or go to the hospital. Well, they'd call on her to take them to the hospital. The hospital was over at Greenville, Mississippi. This was at rural Mississippi where we lived, but she'd have to drive over there. And all us kids, we loved that because it'd be like a celebration of a holiday. We'd go to Greenville, we'd get to go out on the levee and watch the Mississippi River. That was a big kick for us because we never did get to see the Mississippi River very often. But when she'd take sick people to the hospital or the doctor, we'd always go there and make a whole day of it. She'd go to a store and pick up some crackers and sardines and cheese and different things, sliced ham or meat or something, make a sandwich of, and buy us a drink, and we'd have a picnic out on the running board of the car. So we had fun over taking somebody sick over to the hospital or doctor. But my mother was a good Christian woman. She took us to Sunday school and church all the time. She kept us dressed nice. She'd go to shopping on a Friday. She said Friday was her day to go shopping because Saturday was a day for the black people to shop, and she didn't want to be in their way. And she used Saturday for days that she wanted to make a dress for one of us girls. So she'd spend Saturday making a dress for us to wear to Sunday school the next day. So was always dressed well and had good clothes to wear. And my mother was a very good cook, and she kept us dressed nice and all. Hated when I lost my mother in 1918. She died with the flu epidemic and gave birth to a baby. And at the funeral, they had the baby laying in her arms in the casket with her. And they said that was a beautiful casket. First time they saw anybody with a baby in their arms on a casket. So it was a very important day for those who went to the funeral. But the funeral was, we had to drive about 5 or 6 miles to a funeral. The funeral was rural Mississippi. We lived out in the country about 5 or 6 miles, and they had to carry the casket to the grave side drawn with horse mules. I believe it was mules that they used. And we got to the cemetery, there's 3 or 4 other funerals going on because people were just dying fast with the flu epidemic. And that's what my mother had. And Martha May was sick at home. She didn't get to go to the theater because she had pneumonia. And so they had to be very careful. They didn't want her to get any more germs to make her any sicker than what she was, because she couldn't stand to be sick with pneumonia. But we pulled through, and my mother passed away. And when my dad didn't know what to do with all of us children, about 5 or 6 of us now, and so, but he thought about was the orphanage home. And my Aunt Jimmy said, "You're not putting them in the orphanage home." She said, "I'll scratch your eyeballs out and you put them in the orphanage home." And I could just see her scratching my dad's eyeballs out, and I didn't want to do that. So anyway, they decided to divide us up among the relatives and us to be in their home until my dad could find somebody to marry. So he started looking for a wife, and my granddad, his dad, my granddad, said, Everett, why don't you think about Julia Quinn? Said she's a friend to O'Leary. That was one of his daughters. Said she's a friend to her, and said she's a good woman, and said she'd make you a good wife. So he started looking for her. He found her and started courting her, and they got married the following April. And so we all had a home then to go back to. All kids got together, and we had a good celebration of being together again. And I stayed with Aunt Jimmy during the time, and that's where my dad was with Aunt Jimmy, and he was staying there, and she kept me and Eva, the youngest little girl, and she had a little baby boy. So I was a babysitter for those two children at that time. But I went to school, and I had to go by myself, and Bill and I had always been together all these years, about 4 or 5 years now we've been together, and I was lonesome for him, and they hated to see me to go to school. I walked down the railroad track about a mile to the school. It was in Moorhead, Mississippi, and so they finally got Bill to come and stay with us, and I'd have him to go to school with. So every morning when my dad didn't take us to school, when we had to walk, we'd leave early enough and had to walk down the railroad track. And on the way home, we'd walk back home, a mile back home. But we made it, and so when he got married, we all went to the same school at Moorhead. So then we finally moved back to rural Mississippi, and I can't remember just exactly. I was in school, and Bill was in school, Martin May and Ed Lou was in school. So we went to rural school, city school. Then we moved out in the country. We had to go to country school. That was before schools was consolidated. When the county school was able to go to the city schools, they consolidated schools, and then we had to go to a country school until they did consolidate the schools. So we went to country school for a little while. Then we consolidated when we started back to this public school in town. We were glad of that because it more advantages to consolidated school it was a country school. But anyway, we pulled through, and finally students started having children. I was a babysitter for her, and if time a new baby came, I was always happy because I love children, and I just thought that those babies had to be taken care of, and nobody could take care of them better than I could, I thought. But anyway, they loved me, the children loved me, and I loved them, so we was mutual there. I'd come in from school, first thing I'd do is to go to the children and start loving them and taking care of them. And I would spend my lifetime mostly in the home and taking care of children. More than they did the dishes and house cleaning and laundry and things like that. But we all had a job to do. We all worked together. Last school I went to was Slaughter, Mississippi. That was 1929. That was the year that the bottom dropped out of everything. Banks closed, and people's money was closed up in the banks, and couldn't get the money out. And if they had money, they couldn't get it. They just broke like everybody else and didn't have any money. But my dad wanted to move to Arkansas. He found a place up there that you could homestead some, like 80 acres or something, like 40 acres or 80 acres. And he wanted to 80 acres, I believe, but you had to clear it all. So he had one of the black men that liked my dad real well, so he wanted to go with him up there. So my dad had let him go up there, and they got busy trying to clear that 80-acre plot of ground off, and that was 1930. So that's the year that I got married. And Miss Julia had been sick all that year, and that left all the housework for me to do, and all the laundry, and all the cooking and everything. I just had a whole big family to take care of, and I was sick in bed. But I fell in love with my husband, and we got married in 1930. And then after we got married, my dad wanted to move back to Mississippi, so he packed up and moved back to Mississippi. And by then, my stepmother was able to be up and about.
About whatever you want.
Start now?
Mm-hmm. You can start.
Start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I was thinking I left off where my dad was a good provider. He provided for his family, and I never remember a time in my dad's life that he didn't have a way of going. He always had an automobile. As long as I remember, far back as I remember, he's always had a car, and even provided one for my mother. We had 2 cars in our family at that time, and the neighbors would call on my mother to take them to the hospital or to the doctor, and that was a big day for us because we always made a picnic out of that day. We had to go from Ruleville to Greenville to the hospital, and it was always a picnic for us because my mother would take us down on the levee, and that was a treat for us to go to see the big Mississippi River. And she'd go to the store and buy some food for us. We had these beans, navy beans with tomato sauce in them. I can't remember what we called them right now, but we loved those, and my mother carried some spoons in the car for us to eat out of them. She'd open a can up, put it on the running board of the car, and we'd go get us a spoon of red, they were red sauce, you know, and the navy beans. And we always go to the store and buy those beans. What did we call them? They had tomato sauce in them and navy beans. I can't remember what we called them, but anyway, everybody knew them by the name. It just don't come to me right now what we called them. But we loved those beans, and she'd buy crackers and cheese and bologna and stuff like that for us to eat, and we all had a drink. We had a big picnic out of that, going to take neighbors to the doctor or to the hospital. But my mother would take a Friday off to go shopping. That was her shopping day. She'd buy material to make us clothes on a Saturday to wear at Sunday school on a Sunday. But she said, we asked her why she had to take Friday. She said, well, she didn't like to shop on a Saturday because that was the day that black people went to shop, and she didn't want to get in their way. She wanted to get out of their way and not be in trouble to them. And so she always takes Saturday to do a sewing. Like 1 week she'd make me a dress, next week she'd make Ed Lou a dress, the next week she'd make Marley a dress on a Saturday. And we'd all have new clothes to wear all the time. And my dad was a good provider, and we was always well dressed and had plenty of food on the table and everything. I never remember any time being without food on when we had a ration. The war was on, you know, First World War was on, and they had a ration for corn, for flour. We had to eat cornbread for breakfast on Saturday mornings. That was the day my mother picked out to eat cornbread for breakfast because she wouldn't make biscuits that day, and we'd have cornbread. But she'd make something good out of it. She'd make these cornbread pancakes, just like flour pancakes, but they'd be corn cornbread pancakes, and we ate it with syrup and butter. It was good. We enjoyed that, so we didn't miss anything by swapping from cornbread to from flour to cornbread. But we were short of sugar sometimes. We had to do without sugar a lot of times. But I went through 2 world wars, so I know what it is to be on ration. The last World War, I had a car, and we had gas ration and tire ration. And my brother Bill was in the service station business, and I told him I was going to need some tires for my car. He said, well, sis, I don't know whether you're going to get them or not because the ration board is pretty strict. I said, well, you put my order in. I think that I'll get them. So, sure enough, I got my tire, and he called me at work and told me, okay, sis, come over and get your tires. They approved your order. And so I got 4 brand new tires for my car, and he was so surprised because he just didn't think I would be able to get those tires just to go to work in. But I lived out on Lover's Lane, and I was trying to save gas and save my tires too. So I got a place to room and board with the pastor and his family here in town on Martha Street. Then the house was behind where the Baptist church is now. Anyway, I didn't have far to drive to work over to the garment plant on Washington Street, but I let my pastor and his wife use my car to go visiting in. They didn't have a car, and they'd take me to work in the morning and go visiting through the day and come back and pick me up at quitting time. They'd quit visiting at quitting time about 5 o'clock, and we'd all go home, go to the house and get supper ready. But those were pretty hard days during the wartime, having to ration tires and gas too, because the ration board gave the pastor gas too, because he was missing for the church. But we pulled through that war, and I moved over to Meridian with him, and I was over there a couple of years. I was good about going visiting people and getting them to come to church, and they liked to keep me with them because I was always ready to go visit new people. It was hard for me to visit people because I was sort of, I guess, big mouth or something, I don't know, but they always liked to have me around, and I always could start a conversation with strange people. But anyway, I lived with the pastor and his family for several years there, about, I guess, 4 years altogether. They moved up to North Carolina while I moved back to Jackson. My stepmother wanted me to move in with her so that I could help her with the children. It looked like I could handle the children better than she could. So she always liked to have me around. And she was sick too during that time. She had surgery, had a big old hernia in her stomach, big as a grapefruit. She had to have it removed, and I was with her during that time. I stayed in the hospital with her, and times were pretty rough because of the war time and the house full of kids and all. But we had plenty of food and plenty of clothes to wear. We didn't want for anything. But then after Mr. and my dad separated, well, the twins was working at the Bell Telephone, and they saved their money. They bought a house up on Duncan Street in North Jackson, and she moved up there with in their house, and we lived up there for several years, till about 1945, I think it was, when 46 or something like that. When I left, I went to got me an apartment. I thought it'd be better to. By then, I was selling standing home product I had worked 13 years with the Royster Fertilizer Company as a payroll clerk, and I was making more money selling Stanley Home products than I was at the office, so I quit working at the office and went to selling Stanley Home products. I become a unit leader. I built me a unit, and I moved up to Greenwood, Mississippi. That was a new territory for Stanley Home product, and I went up there and built a unit up there. I worked about 5-6 years up in Greenwood, and the war broke out, and the black people was trying to harm the white people, it looked like up there, and I was out at night, and I was sort of afraid to be out at night because they would chase me, my car. They'd watch where I'd go at night to put on a party, and then they'd wait till the party was over, and I'd leave town where they'd get behind me and try to look like wreck me. But I had a better car than them. I'd speed up and get ahead of them, and get away from them, and I'd lose them. But then I got where I'd call the highway patrol and tell them where I'd be that night, and they'd watch for me so that I wouldn't be harmed. So I got thinking, well, I better get out of this kind of business out at night, and black people are trying to harm me. I better get out of this business. So Bessie McPherson, she was my boss at that time. She was a unit leader of manager of Mississippi, on Mississippi of Stanley Home product. So she came by to spend the night with me, and she said, Eunice, Warner, that's her son, Warner Mack, was her son, said, he's opening a music store in Nashville out at Madison, said he needs somebody like you to run the store. Said, would you be interested in it? I said, yeah, I'm looking for a job. I said, I'm ready to give up Stanley because it's too dangerous out here. So I moved to Nashville and worked for Stanley Home, worked for Warner McPherson. He had a country music store, and I ran his music store for him for several years, about 3 or 4 years. And by then, Beverly was down in New Orleans. Her and Cecil had moved down there, and she was having her 3rd child, and I wanted to be down there with them. So I told Warren, I said, I'm not a person to work with men, to run a men's a suit store. I said, you have to get somebody else because I believe I'm about ready to go to New Orleans to be with the kids. So I left there in November, the 1st of November, election day. I remember I listened to an election all the way down to New Orleans. And I got down there and I went to work with, I put my application in the Baptist Hospital. They had an ad in the paper for a cashier. And I knew I could be a cashier, so I'd handle a lot of money. And when I was out handling the payroll at Royster Fertilizer Company, I handled quite a bit of money then. And then when I was in the store, I handled a lot of money. So I knew I could be a cashier. So I put my application in, and instead of writing Warner, I gave Warner Mack as my reference, the last place I worked. So instead of writing him, they called him long distance that day and asked him about my recommendation. And he said, man, you can't get a better woman than her. Says, she's honest and upright. Says, you won't ever be sorry of hiring her. So they called me that day. They told me when I left the office, they'd get back in touch with me sometime over the weekend. But they called me that day and told me to come to work the next day. So I went to work as a cashier at the Baptist Hospital in New Orleans. And I worked there until my brother Bill was going in business in New Orleans for the building business and the porta-john business. So his business was getting so good that he had to have some help. So he was talking to my brother Robert here in Jackson, and Robert said, well, why don't you hire Eunice? You couldn't get any better person than her. And he said, I hadn't thought about that. She's got a good job at the Veterans Hospital. He said, well, just tell her you'll pay her more than they're paying at the hospital, and she'll take it. So he came back home, came back to New Orleans, and he told me that he wanted me to work for him. So I quit my job as a hospital and went to work for Bill. And I worked for him about 9 years, I believe it was, and run his business for him. And so I left there. I retired from him when I got 65. I retired, and I was living in I was living in New Orleans when Bill retired. He retired the next year because I was just a year older than him. So when he moved back to Vicksburg, he says, I don't want to leave you down here in New Orleans. He says, I want you to move up to Vicksburg. And he said, my house I built out there on the Lover's Lane is vacant. You can move in there. No rent, don't have to pay any rent. Well, that looked good to me because I was paying pretty good rent in New Orleans. So I moved to Vicksburg, and I've been in Vicksburg ever since. I moved back to Vicksburg in 1981, and I've been in Vicksburg the longest place I've lived, I guess, in my life. I've spent most of my time in Vicksburg, about 35 years all total. So here I am today, still in Vicksburg. I guess this is where I'll go to heaven. When I get ready to die, well, I'll be still in Vicksburg. So I think that's about, I think I caught up with myself. I think that's about all I want to say. At this time, I can't think of anything else I need to fill in.
Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to Him belong. They are weak, but He is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus loves me, He who died, heaven's gate to open wide. He will wash away my sin. Let His little child come in. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus, take this heart of mine, make it pure and holy thine. On the cross you died for me. I will try to live for me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. The Bible tells me so.